The opening words of a book are very important, right? If you were writing a book, you would want to start with something that grabs the reader's attention, right? Your goal is to hook them because you want them to finish your book. So if you write it and start it in the most boring way possible, they're going to put the book down and not continue. Well, Matthew starts his book with the opposite of an attention grabber. He starts it with a long list of unfamiliar names. It often when I hear people talk about the birth of Jesus Christ and they come to Matthew chapter 1, they say things like, why is that even in there? Or I wish Matthew started some other way, because they find this almost overwhelming. And that makes sense. It's 16 verses covering 2,000 years of history. There's a lot of stuff going on in this list of names that Matthew gives. But when we really spend a little bit of time in this text, if we focus on it and think about it and pray through it, we can begin to see what it is that Matthew is doing and why he starts the way that he does. Verse 1 of this genealogy is very important. It says, the record of the genealogy of Jesus, the Messiah, the son of David, the son of Abraham. So really, in the first verse here, before we've even gotten into any of the names, this genealogy helps us see the fulfillment of Old Testament prophecy. We've looked at how God's story reveals that Jesus will come through these different men. And so here Matthew is purposefully showing it. First, showing us how Jesus comes from Abraham, continuing to confirm that he comes from David. And then it's amazing, right? Because he also calls him the Messiah. And you say, how is he going to prove that? Well, if you go to the end of the genealogy in verse 16, he says, Jacob was the father of Joseph, the husband of Mary. He doesn't call Joseph the father of Jesus because Joseph isn't the father of Jesus. Jesus is born of a virgin. Who can be born of a virgin? Only the Messiah. He's confirmed to us that he's Jesus the Messiah, and Jesus the son of David, and Jesus the son of Abraham. But there's another piece to this that's amazing when you really begin to do your homework. Matthew has listed for us not every person in the genealogy. He's listed for us 42 generations. Why does Matthew choose 42 generations for us as he lays this out in its 16 verses? Well, he tells us that. If we go to verse 17, he explains it for us. He says, so all the generations from Abraham to David are 14 generations. And all the generations from David to the deportation to Babylon are 14 generations. And all the generations from the deportation to Babylon to the Messiah are 14 generations. Why is Matthew purposefully emphasizing 14 generations for us? Throughout the first century, Jews would add up the consonants in a word, and they would use that to place a numerical value on every word that they had. So if you take away the vowels, you only count the consonants, and you put them in the order of their alphabets, you can put a numeric value to their words. Guess what word in its numerical value equals 14? David. D-V-D. You add it up together and it comes to 14. Now here, what Matthew has done is he's given us this genealogy pointing to the fact that Jesus is the promised one, the coming Messiah, and all the way through it, he set it up so that his Hebrew readers are seeing over and over and over again, David, 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 David. It's the promised one through the line of David. It's the King of all kings, the King we've been waiting on, the King from David's lineage. It's amazing. Now, as we study the Old Testament story, there were times in Israel's history where God's promise seemed impossible. The line has been stretched to the point of how could it possibly hold, right? How is the Messiah going to come through here? Like the Babylonian captivity? It seemed pretty bleak at that moment. But sovereign God knew exactly what he was doing. Matthew here shows us that God was directing history all to this moment. God knew what he was doing. God's promises were on purpose. God directed all of history to lead us to the moment of Christ, the promised seed of David. That's what we come and celebrate as we celebrate God's plan of redemption and how perfectly laid out it is.